LCDR just joined DLU. Yep, that's right. No long intro today, just that. LCDR joins DLU. This seems to be cause and effect nowadays. I make a joke about cookies, LCDR joins DLU. I don't know what's going on anymore. Seriously, send help. So if you can't tell, I'm genuinely shocked by this. Out of 3 years in the community, this is by far the most something has ever shocked me. Winston joining DLU was surprising, but it wasn't that much of a shock to the system comparatively. LCDR-U coming out in the first place would have been similarly a large shock, but for the fact that he did tease it in the run-up to its release, so we all knew something was coming. Okay, so I've done some in medias res because I'm a cool kid who remembers his GCSE English, and because I genuinely couldn't come up with a better way to start this video and explain how shocking this is to me. But I think I should provide some actual commentary on this, since that's what you guys are here for, rather than just me voicing my shock to the world via YouTube. So, okay, let's do some background. So, LCDR is most widely known for the fact that he develops the server LCDR-U. It's a server I've discussed at length on this channel, and with good reason, since it's gotten far less coverage than it deserves in general. For this video, though, there are only a few important things you need to know about LCDR-U. It's been probably the longest running server project in existence, depending slightly on how you define when it started, and as of its release about 2.5 years ago, it already demonstrated probably more playable content than any other project has up to the present day. I say all of this basically to point out that LCDR has been an extremely consistent and capable developer over the years, and that basically DLU are lucky to have them on board. So, what actually happened? And this is the point where you get to enjoy me basically explaining a chat log, because that sounded like a great idea, don't know why. As those of you who have watched my previous video will know, Winston01, Uchi's developer, just made the surprise move of joining DLU. Since LCDR recently joined DLU's Discord, which before you ask is primarily closed to testers with a few exceptions like LCDR, I teased him that if he joined, DLU would give him cookies, just like Winston, because we all know that's why Winston joined. He replied that he was still not joining a server that didn't have the same end goal as LCDR-U, specifically to release a server as open source in the end. This led to Darwin, DLU's lead dev, making a statement that I would never have seen coming. The DLU's end goal was in fact to release an open source server. I don't know how long this has been one of their goals, but to my knowledge this was the first time he'd publicly stated this intent. So I was already writing a script just discussing this announcement, that DLU were planning on going open source in the end, when I get a message from Winston telling me to check the list of developers on DLU's Discord. At which point I saw LCDR listed as a dev. It turns out, whilst Winston spent several months talking it over with DLU, effectively, all LCDR needed was to know that their end goals were the same, and that was him in. So, firstly, what's going to happen to LCDR-U? Well, just as Winston did with Uchi, LCDR is going to be leaving the project in its current state. In other words, the current testers will continue to have access to the project, but it will no longer be updated. LCDR has also struck a deal with DLU to allow LCDR-U's current testers to join DLU's testing at some point in the future, rather than leaving them to feel left out and disappointed as he moves on. The LCDR-U website will need to have some changes to it, given that LCDR-U is, well, no longer a project, and will be stripped back to a large degree, as it will primarily now be a site for the dev blog. The Discord server will remain, since there are quite a few people there who are active on that server, but not on the LCH, and LCDR doesn't want to leave them with nowhere to go. For now, what LCDR is working on won't actually change, since his rewrite of large parts of the project into Rust will be compatible with the C++ code DLU's using. One of the best parts of this, for those of you who have complained in the past that DLU has been disconnected with the community or lacking transparency, is that LCDR seems to intend on continuing with his dev blog, meaning that he, at least, will be publishing monthly updates on the stuff he's doing for DLU. I mean, there's no guarantee it'll be a ton of fun, because it's not like he'll just be listing new gameplay features. In fact, typically the opposite will be true, because development isn't always the most event-filled thing about which to blog, but that's not the point. I know I've always enjoyed the development blog, so I look forward to that continuing, and for those of you who haven't seen it, I recommend checking it out. It's a good way of seeing what actually goes into all this development stuff I go on about continuously over here. But what about for everyone else involved, since there's definitely going to be a shockwave rippling out from this particular move? Firstly, let's look at the various other projects. I suspect Simon will be reluctant to move on from OpCrux. In particular, if LCDR and Vincent are going to be updating the documentation with stuff DLU hasn't bothered to upload previously, he may feel this is really the perfect time for OpCrux to somewhat catch up with DLU. But this does at least become an option for him if anything ever happens to halt development on OpCrux in the future. DLU has had a lot of experience getting new developers into the project over the years, so they're relatively experienced at doing this efficiently. And so if anyone can evade Brooks' law and get an extra developer in, it'll be them. And Simon has more than shown off his abilities, so I suspect were he interested in joining, they would accept him. In other words, OpCrux will remain, at least for now, and probably indefinitely. Although it's interesting to note that if at any point, for whatever reason, Simon did join DLU, that would then be the end of all of the closed source projects other than DLU, which is quite interesting. As it is, it's just OpCrux and DLU left standing. Then there's the question of Uchu. So Vincent is no longer planning on actively updating Uchu, as I mentioned before, but that doesn't preclude someone else from deciding to start it up. However, there is a huge difference between someone else beginning development and that development actually continuing, as the quantity of Luni rip-offs attests. Most of the existing developers have projects with which they're particularly associated, but new developers don't join the community that often. Perhaps someone like Tracer, who made a contribution or two to Uchu a while back, and who used to work on JList, for those who remember that, could take it back up, or an existing developer might leave their project to take it up. The main thing which makes me doubt this will happen is that for anyone wanting to join Uchu as a contributor, contributing hasn't gotten any easier. If anything, without Vincent, it'll definitely be harder. In other words, it's quite likely some new people will try and pick it up, but might not get very far. I hope I'm wrong, and maybe Yui or Tracer might work on it, or someone else entirely, but that's not looking hugely likely. Unfortunately, this also damages the chances of an LUCH-supported public server coming out anytime soon, aside from the speedrunning server when that comes back, since Uchu looks like a prime candidate. But, of course, there's the obvious question. What's going to happen with DLU now? And more importantly,
oh my god, does this bring us closer to a test?
Well, firstly, in the all-important rankings I have in my head, DLU has managed to pretty much agar.io itself to the top in a matter of days. But the really interesting thing is this. Vincent and LCDR have both spent a lot of time being the sole person working on their project, meaning a larger group would probably come as a huge relief, taking off some of the pressure. However, they're still going to be heavily invested in LU projects in general. I've talked in the past about the feeling of being trapped by a project and how the time you have already invested can sort of force you to put ever more time in a project and turn it into what feels like a time sink that's just constantly detracting from your life. God, that got a little depressed quite quickly. But the point is that basically Vincent and LCDR are still, whilst they're no longer going to feel entirely trapped by their own respective projects, they're still going to feel that time investment pulling them towards LU projects in general, meaning I wouldn't really expect a huge drop in activity from them. There'll definitely be a period of getting used to a new codebase, of course, and they will be able to take a more relaxed attitude, knowing that there are other devs on the project. It doesn't solely rest on their shoulders. But I would definitely expect great things to come. Both LCDR and Vincent have achieved some pretty impressive stuff in their own rights, and now they will have access to more resources than they have ever had access to at any point in the past. Basically, I'd expect some great progress from the team. This doesn't necessarily mean mission progress or anything visible to the player like that, but I would definitely expect great progress to be made once they settle in. DLU now has indisputably the most knowledge and experience of a single team. Basically, this made me feel really excited for the possibility of LU a lot sooner than I would have previously thought possible. I know we spend a lot of time discussing Brooks' law is in the relation to why the projects don't come in at once. And for those of you who don't know what Brooks' law is, it basically states that having more developers on a project doesn't make it faster, necessarily. But that's sort of the point. It doesn't necessarily make it faster, and it's a huge risk to get new developers into a project. But that doesn't mean it's impossible to do it and succeed in getting it faster. And if anyone can do it, it's definitely going to be DLU. In the past, I sort of saw this whole Brooks' law argument as being one of the reasons. It's a contributing factor. It's the fact that development wouldn't go as fast as you would think. But genuinely, with LCDR, Vincent, Darwin, Avery, all of the devs at DLU, there is now such a wealth of experience concentrated in one place that I don't want to say it will definitely be like 2 years sooner or anything like that. I don't want to make a big prediction. But this excitement is quite tempered by the fact that lcdr-U has been, since it released, and arguably even looking at the YouTube videos beforehand, it's been one of my favourite projects for the past years. And it has been brilliant to work with LCDR, and genuinely, as someone who began just on the DLU forums and spent a lot of time just saying, the things I thought were the correct things to say were the things that basically that DLU would like me to say. It taught me a completely new way of sort of running a server. And yeah, so lcdr-U has been definitely my favourite project to work on, or when I say to work on, I mean as a moderator, to clarify. And it's been brilliant. So I'm sad, but it's tempered with the fact that, this brings us closer to a full release. As those of you who have listened to this channel for a while will know, I haven't always agreed with decisions DLU have taken. And although I have come to understand some of their decisions, I still disagree with some of the ways in which they interact with the community. Vincent and LCDR both avoided many of what I've termed mistakes, so I'm going to be really interested to see how their experiences of working with the community are incorporated, if at all, into DLU's style of working. Basically, I'm hoping this will be the perfect opportunity for them to combine their very different ways of working and interacting with the community into a project that gets the best of all of their abilities. And so, I guess that wraps it up. I'm just going to wait until the day after I post this, when Simon inevitably joins them, just to force me into writing another script. And so with that huge turn of events, I think I'm going to just utterly give up predicting the future and just try to get my head around who's working for who. As usual, the developer channels are in the description. Subscribe to them because, as I say at the end of every video, they're the people who make all this stuff possible. I'm just a guy reporting on it. And with that, I've been an extremely confused Ninja LU, and I will see you around when I can work out which projects I actually work for now. Also, this is now utterly unrelated, but I've received some criticisms about me going off script, and in order to make up for that, I have gone a ton off script in this particular video. And this is currently written in my script as ad-lib something about Encry telling me off for going off script. So yeah, this little bit has been off script. Enjoy.